the Americans. So this TV show is an ongoing TV show, or was an ongoing TV show at this point. The series just aired its final episode, I believe, just last week. So just recently. And so this is a show that ran for 6 seasons on FX. It's been one of my favorite television shows for the past few years. Basically, I'm just gonna do a quick series review for this show. Getting into it, there's 2 primary characters on the show, Philip and Elizabeth Jennings, who are Russian spies for the KGB. And so the story of this whole show takes place in I believe in the 70s or the 80s, somewhere around that time period. And the Jennings family is really what the show centers around, but the show mainly centers around this couple or whatever, Philip and Elizabeth. They also have children and whatnot on the show. Paige is their daughter, and she's the oldest, and then they have a son, Henry, who is the youngest. The show really focuses more on Paige throughout the show. Basically, as KGB spies, Philip and Elizabeth they're tasked with carrying out certain objectives and whatnot, that they believe they're doing these things for the good of their country back home that they haven't seen or been to in years. Basically, both Philip and Elizabeth grew up in very uncomfortable environments. At first, they hate Americans, and they really don't care for the American lifestyle, and they're just there living in the country purely as spies for their country. They're tasked with doing things that they don't necessarily want to do, but that they don't have a problem with doing. A lot of the time, they have to get in close with a particular target. They'll disguise themselves as other people to get close to whomever their target is. That's where the show is at its strongest point. It brings out that high quality in the writing. There's a lot of different characters on the show that are essentially victims of both Elizabeth and Philip because of the orders that they receive. And not once do they really question the things that they do. For example, there are a few different characters on the show where both Philip and Elizabeth will engage in sexual intercourse with, even though that they're married to each other. They're pretending to be other people while they're doing these things. They'll go to any level or whatever to get the information that they need from these targets that they've been tasked with following. That's some of the more interesting parts of the show. And then later on in the series, her daughter, Paige, goes through a lot on the show and whatnot. She really suspects that there's something wrong with the family unit that Philip and Elizabeth have established. And she comes to learn that they are KGB agents, that they are Russian spies. Paige she ends up being recruited. She tries to join their cause. And so that's something that the show does that I thought the showrunners pulled off pretty well, I would say. There's another character on the show called Stan who lives across the street from the Jennings. He has no idea, he has no clue who Elizabeth and Philip really are. He eventually suspects that there's something wrong with the Jennings family, but he doesn't expect it for a long time in the show. He doesn't suspect anything. The interesting thing about Stan is that he's an FBI agent. The Jennings, they try and befriend him and whatnot, and they do so successfully. They try and keep Stan from suspecting who they are. They become friends with him and his family. Stan has issues of his own earlier in the show, like he has a wife and their relationship's not going very well, and he also has a teenage son whom he doesn't really connect to very well. These are some of the other character dynamics that they have on the show. And then they have several Russian characters from Russia who come into contact with Philip and Elizabeth. That just brings that extra dynamic to the show. So when it comes to Philip and Elizabeth, they're living in America and whatnot, and they're taking orders, but they really don't communicate with the people who are giving these orders directly. They're going through someone else who is receiving the orders and then just relaying the information to both Philip and Elizabeth that way. So the show has like the showrunners, they thought of, you know, all the setups and whatnot for the characters. It really does work quite well in the show. The interesting thing about the Philip and the Elizabeth characters is the fact that, like I said before, they will go to any means to achieving the tasks that they're given. And it's not until very late in the show, it's not until the later seasons of the show that Philip in particular, he starts to question, you know, why he's doing what he's doing. And Elizabeth eventually comes to that mindset as well. She's more loyal to the cause and to the job of being a Russian spy than Philip is. When these characters start to have these doubts as far as what they're doing, that's when the show, I think, is at its very best. One of the more interesting dynamics that they do with Philip and Elizabeth's relationship in the show is the fact that their marriage wasn't initially their choice. It was an arrangement that was set up by the KGB so that they could work together, because that's how they set up these KGB agents. They put them in relationships to help disguise themselves within American society. That kind of blends over between their lives as Russian spies and them actually being a husband and wife who actually do have feelings for each other and do love each other. So that's something that I really enjoyed with this series. There's several moments throughout the show, you know, where Philip will do something and Elizabeth, she'll feel like that he betrayed her. She'll kind of shut down on him and prefer that they're just KGB agents and whatnot engaged in this false relationship, which is actually a real relationship, and you know, you do discover that they do actually, you know, love and care about each other. That's another aspect of the show that I felt that worked really well, and it's one of the strongest aspects of the writing on the show. Something that I thought was a weak aspect of the show is the fact that Henry never figures out that Philip and Elizabeth are Russian KGB spies. And I find it strange that with a character like Paige, the kind of character that she is, she's so inquisitive and curious. I would think that she would be the one who would tell Henry about their parents and that they're not really the people that they thought they were. But even Paige never tells Henry the truth. And so throughout the entire series, Henry never figures out who his parents really are. I really think that was a mistake on the showrunner's part. I think it would have been more interesting if they had both children figure out, you know, who Philip and Elizabeth are. And I think that would have opened up a lot more opportunities for different storylines to develop throughout the course of the series. If there was another aspect of the show that I think could have been done better, it's really seasons 4 and 5. I felt that the show took too much time to focus on Paige and her storyline, and so other characters that were in the show kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, such as Henry, for example. I didn't think that seasons 4 and 5 were bad seasons of the show. I just think they were the more weaker seasons on the series. But I would have to watch them again to be certain, to see how I would feel about them rewatching them now that the series is over. All in all, this was a fantastic television show. The themes of loyalty and standing up for what you believe in are some of the few themes that I really think worked very well in this series. It sucks that it's over, but I felt that the series finale wrapped up the series on a very good note. Every storyline and all the characters were concluded in a very satisfying way. And so that's my review of The Americans.